Hello, friends. This is Tamara Bartmus with Lightsome Living, and I am excited to review a couple of charts with you today. I am excited for this USA election, and I know it is election day right now, and I haven't got a chance to deeply study the charts of Kamala Harris or Donald Trump, but I wanted to compare those candidates to the USA, um, birth of the USA in 1776 and also how that compares as far as meeting and interacting with the energy of our country, as well as look at the chart at the end of the election when the polls close tonight. And actually, for Eastern time, will be early tomorrow morning. So let's look at this together. I have a couple of things that I want to review first. We're going to look at the chart of 1776 and why that is important to review and to understand. And then we'll go into Kamala and Donald Trump, and then we will look at the election at the end. Okay, so let me share my screen. And all right. Okay, so as we look at this, one of the things I just want to point out, and I'm sure if you're into astrology, you've been aware of this, the Pluto in retrograde, we have passed that mark, 27 degrees and 33 minutes. In fact, if we create a now chart, we can see that Pluto is in direct motion at 29 degrees. It's past that. We're moving forward. That is a significant, if we felt the intensity of the last few years, it could be part of this rebirth process because labor is intensive and it is part of that sort of rebirth experience that we've experienced as a nation where Pluto introduces the change and the rebirth energy, the transformative energy. And because it's in Capricorn, it sort of brings that element of, hey, it's the country, it's the government, it's the Capricorn structure and organizations that are sort of ruled in that Capricorn energy. So as we look at this, let me go back here. We see that retrograde, Pluto retrograde, we're past that. We see the nodes for our USA chart are very much in South node is in Aquarius, North node is in Leo at 6 degrees. We want to pay attention to that. We see that as a country, we are very Cancer focused, which is really interesting to me as I thought when I noticed this, it reminded me of the Statue of Liberty and that saying on it, bring all your weary and lonely to me, my light shines of the shore at the shore. And sorry, I don't know that by heart, but it just reminds me of land of opportunity, a motherland, a place of hopefully creating a sense of home and emotional safety. We have Mars here and Uranus in Gemini. These are significant, shaking up energies or like revolutionary kind of energies that drive us forward in innovation and in information. We can see that we have Saturn, the ruler of Capricorn, and quasi-ruler of Aquarius, also in Libra. So a certain level of authority and balance, and these are all directive we see. And the only thing that's retrograde on this chart would be Mercury in retrograde, which happens to oppose Pluto in retrograde. And so those retrograde planets, bring a different element of examining thoughts and energy, thoughts and words that we use as a country to change the narrative, right? When we go retrograde, when a planet goes retrograde, it's time to review and get real with the the way that the energy has overextended itself, and how to revisit that and change the old ways. So you can see in that opposition of excuse me, that opposition of Cancer and Capricorn and these two planets, we see a little bit of that teeter-totter energy showing up and really changing how that maybe old ways of operating as a country, old ways of thinking of emotional safety, of home, family, how that is balancing and opposing each other and in some tension for growth. And that's what we love about oppositions. It does create this full moon awareness kind of energy, the ability to see something differently and shift and transition that. Okay. Excuse me. It's my morning voice, apparently. Okay, so let's look at a couple other things. Let's look at Kamala Harris. And when we look at her chart, we'll compare it to the birth chart of the United States as well, and we'll examine what that crossover might look like. I'm not here to predict who will win. I just think it's interesting to understand the different energy of each candidate and what the country as a whole might need for its own evolution and growth. Not so much of like how can the candidate serve the country more than anything else is sort of what I'm looking at. So when we look at Kamala Harris, we see that her nodal axis is between Gemini and Sagittarius. This is notable because if we go back, excuse me, I'll pull up the USA. We see that so the inner circle here is Kamala Harris's birth chart, and the outer circle is the transits of the formation of the United States. And we can see that her north node is at 24 degrees and the Mars is in Gemini at 21 degrees. So that creates a sort of this intense energy and a correlation to the lessons that she needs to learn as far as um, communication and collaboration and speaking. Excuse me. We can see that as far as the Cancer energy, she doesn't have a ton of the Cancer energy that the country was founded with. She has a lot of Virgo energy that doesn't tie in. I mean, it does hit sort of close to the energy of the country with Neptune in Virgo and the midheaven of the country. So there is a correlation there that I think is important to put to be aware of. Um, as far as other significant energy and interactions, we can see that up here, her Saturn retrograde, and again, retrograde is more of an energy that is for introspection and personal growth, and for personal, like taking ownership and personal responsibility first, and then bringing that out into the world. And we can see that that hits the country's moon at we have like this a bit of a rebellious energy as a country. We started from rebelling against Britain, and we have that little bit of how we respond to our emotions is a little bit like, no, I'm going to do it my way, or very Aquarian in like innovation as well as in just needing to stand out, be its own country, and sort of a lot of themes in that for there as well. So we can see that hits there for her. I think she is an Aries moon, and I think that that's always a challenging energy to understand because the moon, this is again, the moon is an indicator of how one would respond emotionally to things. So she might get very passionate and very impatient in certain dynamics, especially if she hasn't learned to harness her passion. It can come out in any kind of unhealthy way because that's a very strong water energy with a fire sign, and it creates a lot of steam, right? So that's an interesting thing to note. She does have a Star of David aspect pattern, which is find it really interesting. So she has a lot of grand air trine, and she has a grand fire trine. Again, that air and fire combination of elements is also something to note and be aware of. Let's see if there's anything else that stands out to me as I review this. She has her Jupiter is in retrograde in Taurus, and so it's also the apex of this mutable T square. It's an out of sign, fire, earth, and air. So that's the apex is also really important to pay attention to. Usually this would be fire, fire, fire. No. I'm just trying to see. Let me go out of this into comparison. Okay. So we have a fixed. I'm sorry, it's a fixed T-square. And so that is something also that creates a little bit of that stubborn energy, that determined energy that shows up here as well. So paying attention to that. She does have a lot of opportunity and trines showing up, as well as it's sort of an equal balance, I would say, of tension and opposition. She was born on a full moon herself. And you can see that 27 degrees, 48 minutes, 27 degrees, 39 minutes. So she was born on a full moon. That gives a different kind of perspective to anybody who was born at that time of the month, and just as an ability to see things with a little bit more objectivity and just a bigger vision, I think. And anyway, that's really interesting. So if there's anything that you know about her chart, please let me know in the comments. I'm always curious to hear what other astrologers or other people who are curious about this same stuff see, because we're all different and we can help each other understand each other with greater compassion. I know in politics, it's very normal to want to vilify the other candidate, and I've fallen victim to those kinds of tendencies myself. But I feel like, when we look at people as just humans and children of God, I feel like we can see a lot of different things. Now, we can't control other people. We can't, we try to make sense of other people's actions and their choices. But I think understanding and recognizing that we're all unique individuals and we have a part to play in God's bigger plan for all of his children. I just sort of set it aside and be like, I'm not the judge, and let God be the judge, and try to bring a certain level of compassion for each person that we easily vilify or easily condemn in especially our social media age. So that's something that I think is important to note. As far as Donald Trump goes, I find his chart, you can see it's actually quite simple. He doesn't have a ton of aspect patterns. A lot of the planets were very close to each other when he was born, and it's not as chaotic, which is interesting, right? To consider that as far as the aspect pattern is showing up. So just to highlight a couple things, Donald Trump was born on a lunar eclipse, also a full moon, similar to Kamala, but it was an eclipse. And that creates a different kind of energy to what he brings to the country to consider. He was also it was all in conjunction with a pretty tight conjunction with Uranus. So he's sort of meant to be, I guess we would say, like with his words, and the Gemini energy here can come off really abrupt, a really sort of Aquarian feel to it. And also very simple. Some people have criticized, I believe, Donald Trump for his many like simple phrases, choices of words that are very like almost elementary. This speaks a lot to Gemini energy. Gemini energy doesn't have to be very articulate as far as like really knowledgeable. That would be something that you might see more in your Sagittarian energy and that opposition that plays out there. But he does have Sagittarian energy because he was born on a full moon with opposition of the moon there. So his emotional response to things might actually be more measured and weighed, but his instinct might be to, an ego might be caught up in like the quips and the remarks and the simple words that he uses. He does have a lot of Cancer energy. I think people would be surprised to note that when I did and I have a video of this I'll post after I get it edited, but you can see, and I'll do one for both him and Kamala that show their dominant energy. Now, you might be like he's a Gemini sun, but his dominant energy isn't necessarily Gemini. And the way that I calculate it is sort of gives a different perspective into um, the the energy fingerprint over just the sign placement. And so actually, Donald Trump is more dominant in Aquarius energy and in Gemini energy. Sorry, not Gemini, Cancer energy. So he has more Aquarian and Cancer energy, whereas Kamala Harris, she has more Virgo and a very even balance of Gemini, Aquarius, and Pisces. And I would say Donald Trump is leading with his Aquarius and Cancer energy, followed by his Leo and then his Gemini. So that if you understand signs energies, just take that into consideration. It is very an interesting thing to note how much Cancer energy that he actually has because he's sort of not acknowledged for his caring nature in media coverage as much as he is for his maybe simple sort of simple-mindedness and his bluntness and anyway, it's a very interesting thing to note there. He has let's see here. His Mars is at 26 degrees Leo, and he also has a 10-degree Leo Pluto. His nodes, we talked about those. His midheaven is Taurus, just barely. This is a Placidia. Oh, this is an equal chart. Hold on. What if I changed it? Let's edit this chart. If I changed it to tropical equal, tropical Placidius, create as new chart. Oh, it does change it just a little bit. Here, I'm going to save this. If I'm going to flip back and forth, actually, we'll just pull up the second chart so you guys can see it. It's just subtly different if you flip it between Placidius and equal. So this is, yeah, Placidius. Uh-huh. And hold on. We are going to look at this. This is Placidius, and we're going to make this is also Placidius. So we're going to add this, and we're going to select the equal chart. Yeah, this is equal. There it goes. It's showing up right there. So you can see that it doesn't change a ton of his placements. I'm just trying to make sure is everything in the same house. 24, it's just slightly different. So we're going to go, this is his Placidius, and then this is his equal. This is his, I'm going to go back and forth. Again, Placidius. There is a slight shift. Let's look at this. And here is his equal. It's just the houses shift a little bit. But most everything else is the same. So we're going to go back to Placidius, and I'll keep reading on him. Okay. So one of the things that we point out is this this apex here, his Mars and Leo on his ascendant, I think is also a very interesting point. You know, Leo energy can be very full of themselves. It can be very creative energy. It can be a very playful and fun energy, but it also can get caught up into it's like, look at me kind of thing, right? And you need a certain level of that, I think, for either Kamala or Donald Trump. Like if we go back to Kamala's chart, we can see that she also has Mars in Leo, which is really, really interesting. So there's a little bit of that fire and fire that she's, you know, like a little bit willing to put herself out there as well. So the fire in the Leo is not a problem. It's again, it's the energy there that helps you achieve and move forward and grow as an individual. So he has his Pluto also there. And when we look at Pluto, it's very interesting to me because it's almost like Pluto is the like the rebirth energy, the makeover energy. And so he has an opportunity to sort of rebirth his own ego and he like have a significant change in that. When we looked at Kamala's chart, she doesn't have Pluto, of course, in Leo. Her Pluto is in Virgo. So she was born later, of course, I think about 18 years, to be honest, because they both have the same nodal axis. But so again, her rebirth is more in her mind, the way she thinks, and she can have a little bit of that Uranus, like a rebel energy in the way she thinks and analyzes, and you know, a value of her mind. She's probably very intelligent, very smart, but also can be an overthinker and a little bit caught up in that mental game if she doesn't keep check on that, right? So if we go back again, sorry, I'm jumping back and forth, but I think this is so fascinating. Again, just to give your perspective on different characters. Donald Trump, if you look at this, he has a lot of Libra energy, whereas Kamala had more Virgo energy. And so his ability to negotiate or to balance things out or to create peace and harmony, that is an value for his based off his birth chart. We also see that Jupiter is stationing. Actually, I did not look this up if it's stationing direct or if it's stationing retrograde. Let me go forward and oh, it's stationing direct because it was retrograde before. Okay. Um, so let's go back to his, oops, I didn't mean to do that. What did I do? It's the fun of trying to do this live. Okay, this is the Placidius chart. All right. So that's really actually a poignant. Anytime a planet stations is in stationary movement, it is actually quite an intense moment, bringing a lot of, and again, Libra energy, considering he's had multiple marriages, multiple opportunities for partnership. He's a very successful in business, negotiation, and stuff like that. It's very interesting to have all this energy here, including his Chiron and Neptune in retrograde. So again, like sometimes getting disillusioned by things, sometimes the weakness of his own wounds that's contributing to weaknesses in partnerships, and then but this Jupiter here that's conjunct all of this is very fascinating because it's stationing direct and it's moving again forward at a significant point. The other thing that's really interesting about his chart is that not many people's birth charts have the nodes on station direct because he was born on an eclipse. That means his nodal path isn't in retrograde. And some people are like, oh, that's, everybody has it in retrograde. Well, he doesn't. And this is a really interesting thing to note. And I'll show you why in a second, because it points to a part of his ability to move things forward and to live out his life lesson, personal lesson, and mission as well. So we can see that anyway, that is something to note as well. I would also say with his chart, and I'll go back to Kamala's to make sure I didn't miss this, but he has an intercepted signs of Cancer and Capricorn, meaning again that if he can get the energy of Gemini and Sagittarius right, things will show up better in his Capricorn and Cancer energy. He also has double Aquarius and double Leo, meaning the intercepted 6th and 12th house. So that is just extra energy there to teach him in multiple areas of his life how to be himself, but also allow himself to be part of the group, and that tension that naturally exists between how do I shine and how do I also conform to the group, and that tension that can be a challenging thing to navigate. I'm an Aquarius sun, and that definitely is a challenging lesson to learn. So back to just to highlight these points before I pull up the USA chart. He has he's a dominant as far as energy goes, as a dominant Cancer and Aquarius, followed by Leo. Then we would bring in his Gemini and Taurus energy. Okay. If we go over to Kamala, we're going to see. I just want to double check. She doesn't know. She is equal. I mean, she has all the signs on all the house lines. So, Kamala has a dominant Virgo energy with an equal Gemini, Aquarius, and Pisces energy. So again, unique people, unique gifts, and how is that going to compare to what they can bring to the United States? So if we go back to Donald Trump and we look at his tropical Placidius, or Placidus, I guess, however you choose to say it, let's look at him compared to the United States. So we might actually want to flip this, but we're going to leave it for right now. 1776. Okay, so we're going to look at his chart and then we'll flip these and put the USA in the middle and look at that. So we can just see the energy points of the outside. Again, actually, I'm just going to flip it now so we don't get confused. We're trying to see how does Donald Trump actually support the mission or birth chart of the United States of America? And if we look at this, we can see that he has his Cancer energy influences and actually pours into the 8th house of the United States, which is our transformative house, right? Which is also interesting. So he has a lot of Cancer energy, so does the United States. He's 22 degrees, 20 degrees north node of Gemini, and USA has that on Mars. And so that sort of triggers that interaction there. Um, they also share Uranus in Gemini, but they're, separate. They're pretty far in degrees apart. Um, you see the country is the moon in Aquarius, and his descendant is a basically at the same point. And if we go up here, the country's Saturn in Libra is exactly his Chiron wound. So again, with the story of Chiron is this story of learning to deal with your weaknesses, the things that really challenge you, and transforming them and becoming a mentor to other people. And so this could, I mean, he's old enough. He should have learned these lessons or is still probably learning some of them, where he can actually become a great mentor to the country. I guess we could call it like that. Um, and if there's anything else that's correlated significantly, I think conjunction is probably the strongest aspect. And so that's what I'm highlighting the most over the other aspects of trines or sextiles or squares. But I think that that is something to just pay closer attention to when it comes to this. Now, as a country, we are a Sagittarian rising country. We have this sense of freedom and independence and like and a need for exploration, right? He brings a little bit of that energy. It's at 12 degrees Sagittarius for the country. He's a 21-degree Sag moon. And so that shows up there for him too. If we look at Kamala's chart, just a real reviewing that as well, based comparing to the country. I don't think I had the chart set up this way. I think it was flipped with her in the middle. So we're gonna again compare her to the country, not the country to her. So we can see that again, her Mars is at 21 degrees. That's relatively close to the node, but you want the nodes to be pretty darn close. They don't have much. Again, a node is a mathematical point. So when it hits it right on the degree, that is the most potent aspect to pay attention to. It's hitting right at her ascendant or so, close to. So I think that's interesting that this energy shows up in the country's seventh house. Um, her nodal axis is the country's seventh house. And then her Saturn retrograde is in the country's third house. And let's see, anything else that Mars, not Mars. The moon in Aries is hitting relatively close to Chiron at 20 degrees and 27 with her moon. And then we have Neptune again, just off of her stellium here in Virgo. Um, and I wouldn't say that these are relatively close unless you do whole house aspects, which I don't tend to read them very much. So, again, I see, as far as like interactions between the two charts, I see more impact from Donald Trump on the country, as far as conjunctions than I do initially with her on the country. There's just more conjunctive energies showing up for him over her. Um, Now let's look at the election night. So I'm gonna do this reading. When we look at the election night, we're gonna look at Donald Trump in the middle of the chart in the inner ring, and then we're gonna put the election night closing. Election polls close. I said this is based off of Alaska's time, which would be November 6th at 1 a.m. Washington, D.C. time. Okay. So I know that some of the polls might not completely close. In fact, let me switch this. We'll do Kamala first. Um, and uh, because things get hairy on election day, let's be honest. So we're just going to say what is happening in our capital of the United States at that time that the polls are supposed to close, and how does that correlate to Kamala? So Kamala is here. Actually, I think I want to flip it. We're going to have the elections in the middle, the close of the polls, and how that interacts with her birth chart. So if we're just looking for tight conjunctions here, we can see that Uranus in Taurus is hitting for the country is her Jupiter retrograde. That I don't know. Jupiter retrograde is again a correction of something that has gone overextended itself. And Jupiter can very much try to stretch itself way beyond its means and needs a self-correction. So that's an interesting alignment there. I think there's a financial shift going on. I don't know if this serves her so much to her. I mean, I'm curious what your thoughts are, but I don't know if it serves her so much or the country so much to have her Jupiter retrograde at this point. Um, we can see that the Jupiter is retrograde at 20 degrees. Her Gemini north node is at 24 degrees retrograde. And that isn't super close, but it's within, I mean, for a node, it's not, but for an ascendant, that might play a little bit part. But let's see here if there's anything else. Not, we have 14 degrees of the sun in the sun in Scorpio, and that's hitting her 16-degree Neptune. So there might be like a spiritual insight and impression that she receives throughout this process. And let's see if there's anything else. We see Saturn for the country, the poles closing. It will be 23 degrees, Venus in Sagittarius, and that is relatively close to her south node. Um, let's see here. Saturn is at 12 degrees retrograde, relatively close to her own Chiron retrograde. And that's a very interesting point that her Chiron is retrograde. That I see that with the redness of this number on this program. But again, this might be an opportunity for her to have a reality check and to heal some deep wounds, core wounds, as Chiron sort of brings out those to the surface. And then you have her Aries moon sort of conjunct the country's Chiron. So again, very interesting correlation to that as far as her own ability to be emotionally independent and sort of passionate and fight for that as well as and what that means and brings to Chiron as a country where we have Chiron in retrograde. Sorry, it's not as a country. It's an elections polls closing. Why did I think that? So again, just something to pay attention to as far as that goes. Okay. So let's flip it and go look at Donald Trump and his birth chart compared to when the election polls close. Something that is of note, again, we see his Neptune retrograde is exact to the country's south node in Libra. That exactness, I mean, there's lots of different ways to interpret that, but that is important to note, okay, that is an exact point there. Another thing to note, if we look at the country, it's Jupiter retrograde in Gemini. It hits his exact north node. That exactment of his own life purpose and lesson that hits the country's Jupiter retrograde in Gemini is also important to note as far as opportunities opening up for him and also bringing something to help see something maybe differently that the country hasn't seen before. We can see that we have the election polls close at 0 degrees. Mars has just moved into Leo, which is interesting. And within range of his own Cancer energy there with Venus and Saturn and a little bit of Pluto. So yeah, I think that even as that Mars continues to move through Leo, it's actually going to expose a lot of interesting fire energy. So that's fascinating to look at. His Sagittarius does and South Node does sort of get close to the Sag Venus for the poles closing. Anyway, sort of fascinating, right? Just to consider these conjunctions in the sky. So, like I said, the poles closing, there is a lot of retrograde energy right now, sort of a changing revolutionary, like we've gone too far, it's time to correct. is very fascinating to see what that might look like in lived experience. And like I said, I am not here to predict um, who will win the election, but I felt it was important to note this before the election outcomes are definitive, and just to have the conversation again to consider that we are all very individual in our life purpose and our life mission, our life lessons. And this is playing out on the public stage for Donald Trump and for Kamala Harris. And we can be very critical of that, but we also can be very curious about it because it's not just a public experience, but it's also a personal experience for them, especially in the ways that they're impacting the world. So, um, I hope that you get out to vote. I hope that you get your voice heard. I hope that you, have your own insight and your own patience with everybody's process of growth here. I have my own personal political opinions, of course. I hoped I could do this video in a very I'm a Libra rising. I try to look at all sides of the picture. I try to see it for all the good that can be by anybody that comes to the table if they choose it and how they express themselves to the world. And I pray for our nation. I pray for the success of our leaders, and I want the best for all of us as we navigate building a country together for hopefully the betterment of all, as our Declaration of Independence, strives to achieve as well. So, anyway, let me know in the comments if you guys have any questions or insights. I love to hear other people's perspective, and I'm totally open to have missing something. There's no way that I could do all this in, like and see everything and every nuance. So I'm open to your thoughts and insights. Please let me know. And if you found this helpful and fun and informative, please like and subscribe to my channel, and we'll see you guys later. Good luck.